Hey everybody, today I wanted to take a look at some of the greatest RPGs that ever existed. The ones that got us started getting into RPGs in the first place. After all, the games that sent us down these paths through the annals of RPG history are absolutely the most important to most of us. The ones that opened those gateways for us, that sent us down looking for journeys to go on and quests to complete. These are the games that got us into the genre, and it's not just a story about me. I will tell you about my story as well, because I don't think I've ever told it in full at this point. But also joining me are going to be some of the patrons who I asked over on patreon.com to tell me about some of the games that most got them into RPGs, and to hear some of these stories is incredibly heartwarming, so stick around. By the way, go ahead and post yours down in the comments down below. What are some of the games that you played that got you into the genre? To start us off, I wanted to talk about, I guess, some of the games that got me in. The gateway games that sent me down this spiraling path that got me to where I am today. And that's got to start with back in preschool, believe it or not, when I was, 5 or so. I think I got my first taste of The Legend of Zelda. This is a game that I played a little bit of because it was available in like the back room where they put the kids when they were kind of sick. They had this old TV in the dark room, and you could play, a few games if you were able to. And there were some interesting ones, but the one that caught my interest the most was the Nintendo classic Legend of Zelda. And this is a game that, I played it for the first time, and something about it really appealed to me, but also really scared me away from the game. I was very young, and I think that a lot of the critters coming up out of the ground and attacking you and following you everywhere gave me crazy amounts of anxiety. Alerts would go off when you had just a few hearts left and you're just trying to stay alive, and then you die, and oh no, and it fades to black. Oh no. So that was my first taste of what I would call my gateway, my path to the gateway of RPGs. But the next game that really, I think, was the next formative layer in this pathway into RPGdom was when I was visiting my dad's best friend. So he brought me along, and his friend was a big video game collector and player. He had Sega Genesis, he had Super Nintendo, and he had the light gun games that you could hook up with the Menacer and stuff. It was super cool. He also had a copy of The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. And this is a core memory of mine, was seeing this game. He allowed me to play a little bit of it. Something about this, I think it wasn't quite as scary. It was brighter, more colorful. It really drew me in. And this was my first a real foray into The Legend of Zelda, and I was absolutely hooked at this point. There was something about this, using the sword and the shield and going on in this adventure, walking around to go down these dungeons and just fighting all these enemies. It was something so cool. I knew that I had to play more games like Zelda. So eventually I actually got my own Super Nintendo. One day I just went and bought a used one with some saved up allowances, and best purchasing decision I ever made. I bought Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past alongside it, and finally, after many years of just playing it a little bit here and there when it was available, I finally sat down, played it from start to finish, and fell in love with the Zelda series for real. This one was definitely that core memory that set me off looking for more games like Zelda. So eventually, I did find other games like Zelda, like Secret of Mana. I actually found out about Secret of Mana from my sister. I have a bigger sister, an older sister who's 6 years older. She had a friend who talked about some of his favorite games when he was visiting one day. And he was talking about Secret of Mana and how I should probably check that out if I was into games like Zelda. It was hard to find games back in the day. E-commerce wasn't really a thing at the time. This was in the before times, before places like eBay made finding everything incredibly easy. You just had to go to your game store and hope they had a copy. I could never find a copy of Secret of Mana until one day I found a website called gamefinders.com or something like that. I don't remember what they are anymore, what they looked like. All I remember is I probably spent way too much on a copy of Secret of Mana at the time. It was $70 in order to get it shipped. But my dad was like, all right, we'll go ahead and get it. If this is what you really want, we'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to buy something. It was the first online purchase we ever made as a family, and it took a while, but it finally showed up, and I plugged it in, and I loved it. I don't think I ever actually finished it until much later in life, but that didn't stop me from like looking around for other games and stuff, and I finished Legend of Zelda. It was old news to me, and what you would do back in the day is you would trade in your old games and you would buy new ones. So I took in a copy of Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and I was asking around, and I said, I want another game like Legend of Zelda. And they gave me, well, they didn't give it to me. They sold me. I had to pay extra, but it was probably the best purchasing decision of my entire life, and that was Earthbound. It was like $20 plus a trade-in of Link to the Past. I don't know what the guy was thinking when he gave me this copy of Earthbound, but I appreciate him eternally. I did not appreciate him at the time. So in this game shop, you could like plug in the cartridge and you could play a little bit for a little while. You know what happens in the first few minutes of Earthbound though? Not much. A little asteroid kind of hits the ground, the ground shakes, you know, you get to see a little bit of Juanette, and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be like Zelda, like Secret of Mana or something. Oh, this is going to be really cool. It was very different. I got as far as like getting a baseball bat and walking outside and like wandering around. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be super cool. It's like Zelda, but like current modern day. Let's check this out. I can't wait to figure out how to swing my baseball bat that I got from Tracy, my sister, and well, that ended up not being at all how the game played in actuality. So when I eventually figured that out, I threw the game in my closet and I never ever looked at it again until one fateful summer. One fateful summer, I finally had nothing else to do, and I had no other games to play, and I was thinking, all right, let's see what this is all about. Let's try it again. I plugged it in, and the rest is history. It finally clicked for me. Eventually, I figured out what this whole turn-based combat thing is. I figured out how to equip my weapons, kind of like in Secret of Mana. That helped a little bit, I think. These things all kind of culminated eventually in finally figuring out how to play Earthbound, and eventually when I finally the story of how I finally defeated Earthbound was a crazy one, but it solidified my love of RPGs then and there. It showed me that RPGs could transcend every other storytelling medium that I had experienced up to this point. I was in my early teens at this point. I think that Earthbound was not only the first video game, but the first piece of media that actually brought me to tears. Like no book, no TV show, no movie had ever like actually got me so choked up that I teared at the end. Another core forming memory of my being today was made through Earthbound. And again, to that crazy employee who gave me Earthbound when I wanted Zelda, thank you. I didn't appreciate it at the time like I should have, but man, I'm feeling it now. Now I want to just kind of shine some of the spotlight on some of the patrons who also answered this question that I posted them over on my Patreon. Starting with this one from Tomoki G, who said that the Bard's Tale was their entry gateway for RPGs. On the C64, the Commodore 64, which they had on tape. Loading it was a bit of a nightmare, they said, but the game was just so much fun that from then on, he took every RPG that he could find. And a lot of these, unfortunately, are pretty lengthy, so I'll just read a few of the highlights from them. But Tyrone said that Persona 4 Golden came highly recommended by his brother, so he gave it a chance and just didn't get it. He says, so we're just going to take turns hitting each other? Then one day he was just bored and gave the game a chance and finally fell in love with the combat system, and the story was excellent. So a lot of this rhymes a lot with my experience talking about Earthbound, just not getting it at first. You know, not always is it love at first sight, but sometimes it is, like this one from Snapper who said, for me, it was a friend showing me an obscure game called Ishar 3 on his PC when I was about 9. I've never heard of this game before. I can't wait to look up footage of it. He says that the game had very nice graphics for the time and allowed you to create your own party. it was love at first sight indeed. Got the game, played it, but never finished it because it had kind of a nonsensical puzzles and stuff. Skipping ahead, he does say he went back and replayed it at some point, and he can say for sure at this point he will never touch the game again. So not exactly a glowing recommendation, it sounds like, but I can't wait to see what this game looks like. And then I got this one here from Chris, who was talking about how they found Tales of Symphonia during a really kind of dark time in their life, and it kind of helped them through a little bit of that. And now that they're a happier and healthier adult, they can just go back and play them again and just appreciate it a little bit differently this time around. And that just, it's really awesome being able to experience games in different situations of your life and pick out different things and see how that affects your perceptions of them. And man, the Tales series is one that I've dipped my toes into a little bit of, but man, I need to make sure I get myself back into that. I heard so many good things about Symphonia. Yellow Streetlight here has a story about playing the game through his cousin, basically vicariously playing through Final Fantasy IV, backseat driving his way through the game. Which, oh man, that has to be such an interesting memory, like choosing certain abilities because they looked super cool on screen. Oh man, and eventually it looks like they were able to finally get their own copy, and once they finally got their own SNES, and the rest is history. And now Nate Coffey here, he actually started off with Final Fantasy 1, and he played a little bit of it when he was like 8 or 9, but it wasn't until Final Fantasy 4 that things really clicked, and he was following the story of Cecil and his character going through his arc. And oh man, it's pretty wild how these games, we're seeing a lot of rhyming here. A lot of these things, like maybe at first it didn't succeed, but if you just keep trying, you'll find a game that just gets you to fall in love. And Final Fantasy IV, it was also one of my first RPGs after Earthbound, and man, it just hits different, especially when you're younger. Oh man, it was such a good experience. And keeping it with Final Fantasy, Bronson actually had a really awesome story talking about how his dad had a girlfriend who had a daughter who was a bit older than him, and it was actually she who introduced him to Final Fantasy IX. They just like huddled around the TV and watched the opening intro cinematic. His ability to just like identify immediately with Zidane as somebody that he wanted to be, and Vivi as somebody who he felt like he currently was at the time. Man, it's such a beautiful thing. And apparently this went on to form as one of the pillars of his ongoing relationship with his stepsister, which is so insanely cool. Another one here from Mesa Jake, who had a very similar story to my own, which was it wasn't until his birthday when his mom took him to get a copy of The Legend of Zelda from Woolworths, and it was, for him, the original Legend of Zelda was the one that did the trick, apparently, with the kind of leveling aspects, the giant dungeons, being able to go and explore all of these. It's such an awesome story. And then eventually that led him on to games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy. A lot of people say that it's not an RPG because, understandably, it's kind of not. It's on the RPG spectrum. It's on the far end, on beyond action RPGs, even though it is RPG adjacent. At least it has been an incredible gateway RPG, or gateway to RPGs, for a lot of people, including myself. And it's really cool to see that other people feel the same way. And then we got this one here from RockX00. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but they also got one of their starts through Secret of Mana. He says that a friend of his had it and just didn't like it at all, sold it to him for $5. That is a steal of a deal. I would take that every day, all day. $5 for Secret of Mana, man. Plugged in that cartridge and you hear the whale sound, that creepy sounding roar. It's so iconic. Plus the little Square logo kind of appearing. Man, that Squaresoft logo, when you would see that pop up on any RPG coming up, you knew you were in for an awesome time. I want to have a whole discussion with everybody down below about what the games were that got you into the genre, and where are you now with your love? Do you still like those games? Was it love at first sight? Let me know in the comments. And everybody from my Patreon who decided to respond, thank you so much for sharing your incredible stories. I hope that we can continue bringing new people into the genre for years to come. Gosh, it's such an uplifting and heartwarming sort of story. So thank you all. and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day, everybody.